It feels so early this morning, doesn't it? But it's so fun to hear all the energy in the room and all the conversations taking place. Hey, welcome to Wake Up West Coast. We're so glad that you're joining us today. And whether you're here in person or joining us online, we think that you're in for a treat today. My name is Jody Ozarski. I have a privilege of serving on the West Coast Chamber team. And we're so excited to kick off this program year again with Wake Up West Coast this morning. Before we really get rolling, as always, we need to thank our sponsors. And today, I'm joined by Bill Hofer from Spectrum Health Zeeland Community Hospital. Bill, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jody.
And so a couple of things so that we can let the people here know a little bit more about Spectrum Health. Talk to me a little bit about how the hospital has continued its commitment to meet the needs of people in Allegan and Ottawa County.
Yeah, well, that's a fun question to answer, and a couple of the things that I'm most proud of is over the last couple of years we've actually done some major expansions to the hospital. We've created a new surgical suite. We've completely redesigned our front lobby of the hospital. Just a couple weeks ago, we opened up a new outpatient lab, which makes coming to get a lab much easier. But one of the things that I'm most proud of, though, is actually throughout the pandemic, our team, which is really the lifeblood of the organization, was able to do a great job keeping the hospital open. You know, during the pandemic, so many hospitals in Michigan and really around the country had to go on diversion quite a bit. And because of our team and their hard work, we were able to kind of stay open really for the duration with a couple of small exceptions to really serve the community. And I'm just something I'm very proud of.
That's fantastic. I know how challenging the pandemic has been on everyone, but specifically for healthcare workers. I'm curious how your team inspired hope through all of that.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do as a hospital administrator is to be able to round through the hospital, to read comments on customer service surveys, and also to kind of recognize and award our team. We've actually got 2 awards, the Daisy Award and the B Award, to recognize nurses who really stand out and also other supportive people who stand out. And when you hear these stories, we hear about people who are really great at listening, people who are able to show great compassion, people who are great educators. And you know, those tenets, those concepts, when we hire, we try to find those people because we know that when you come to the hospital, you want to be cared for. And when you listen, when you educate, when you show empathy, most often your needs are going to be met. And I think that's one example of how we've done that.
That's fantastic. So quality and safety, never more important than it is right now, especially in a hospital setting. What are some recent accomplishments in that area that you've experienced at the hospital?
Yeah, so we focus heavily on safety within the hospital, and we educate and train our teams to have a questioning attitude. If someone's doing something that doesn't quite make sense, we want our nurses, our housekeepers, the people in registration to kind of speak up and say, hey, like, why is it that we're doing it that way? We want people to communicate clearly when a physician is giving an order. We want to make sure that it's very clear, this is the drug that I'm ordering, this is the dose, and this is how we want it administered. We want people to pay attention to detail. You know, if something is out of place, we want people to notice that and to speak up. And most of all, we want our team to be good teammates. In a past organization that I was part of, we called it, you know, don't ever leave your wingman. But, you know, the basic concept is be a great teammate. And the way I try to explain that is if I, as the hospital president, walk into a patient room and I don't wash my hands, which is a big no-no, then I want someone to speak up and say, hey, Bill, don't forget to wash your hands. We want to wash our hands to kind of keep people safe. And what that has led to is we've had 12 consecutive periods of being A-rated by the Leapfrog Group, which is something that probably all of you should know about. You can go to a website called hospitalsafetygrade.org and learn all about hospital safety. And to be A-rated, it's A through F, A-rated 12 periods in a row is almost unheard of. Just a few weeks ago, we were recognized as in the top 3% of all community hospitals nationally around quality, safety, patient experience, mortality, and none of that would be possible without great people. So one of the big plugs I wanted to put in this morning is for all of the families of West Michigan, the educators of West Michigan, the people who are community leaders, because this community has done a great job bringing up and raising some good people. We have a great team, and that team is from this community, and they're a team that we're very proud of and have made all of this possible.
Bill, that's fantastic. Congratulations on all the great work that's happening at the hospital, and thank you for your continued support of the West Coast Chamber. We truly could not do the work that we do without our sponsors and the support that you provide, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Jody. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so you know if you're at a chamber event, we're always going to work in a little bit of networking, and so we're going to take time to do that right now. You've told us that you want a little bit more time at the tables to be able to make connections with the people that you're seated with. So we are going to give you 6 minutes, 1 minute per person at your table. See how that works? And so what we want you to do is take a minute to be able to introduce yourself, your name, your company, and then talk about where you get the most leadership influence. Are you learning from podcasts? Do you have a favorite author? Where are you getting that leadership influence? And share that with the people at your table. All right, 6 minutes, go. Hopefully that's just a good start for the morning. Feel free to continue those conversations after our presentation today. I hope that you also learned some tips from the people sitting around you of some great leadership resources. If you were with us at our annual event last week, was it last week? 2 weeks ago, you would have heard us talking about the fact that our theme this year is together. So much more can happen when we do it together. And this morning, I want to recognize some key volunteers that are working together with us as the staff at the West Coast Chamber that help us do the work that we do. We have an incredible group of ambassadors who serve as additional hands and feet for the West Coast Chamber staff. They're out there every day being ambassadors for our organization, making sure that they're spreading the good news of membership and what those benefits look like and making those connections with our members far beyond what we as a team of 6 could do. So this morning I'd love to have our ambassadors stand so that we could thank them for the work that they do together with us. Thanks, Ambassador team. You guys really do make a huge difference in the work that we're able to do. Okay, with that, it is time to get started this morning. And I'd love to introduce to you our speaker this morning, Graci Harkema. A couple of months ago, the Chamber went through a process of reviewing our core values. And at that time, we realized that we needed to step it up and change one of our core values. And so we have a new one that's called Be a Trailblazer. For us, that's super aspirational. We want to go where nobody has gone before. We envision a bold future that we believe we can help shape. And when we think of today's speaker, Graci, I see her absolutely as a trailblazer and the perfect person to kick off our Wake Up West Coast season. Graci specializes in implicit bias and inclusive leadership training with companies all around. She has a bachelor's degree in communications from Grand Valley State University and now is the author of Rising from a Mud Hut to the Boardroom and Back Again. Please join me in welcoming Graci Harkema.
Thank you so much, Jody. Appreciate it. Good morning. How are you? All right, sound check. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, raise your hand if you are not a morning person, because I'm not. I am really impressed. Thank you for being here. I know the struggle was real. Trust, I was with you on that struggle. But thank you. I promise you that the next 40 minutes will be worth your time. And if it's not, you'll get a refund maybe. So my name is Graci Harkema. I'm so excited to be here with you. It's great. I was driving in. I live in Grand Rapids. I'm like, wow, it is really dark outside. It's been a while since I've seen the sunrise. So, so this is great. Yeah, let's get into it. So, a little bit about me. I was born in a mud hut in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The hut that I was born in looks very similar to the hut that you see on the screen. And for those of you who are thinking, Gracie, okay, I hear what you're saying, but it's been a minute since I've been in geography class. Where you see the red heart, that is where the Congo is. I was born at a time where there was a lot of civil unrest. If you're familiar with the Rwandan genocide, I was born prior to the genocide, where there were riots that were sweeping through various villages. And the riots weren't like riots that we see in the US where people stand in the street with a sign. These were riots that were violent and that were deadly. There were a lot of, there was trauma and violence against women, where many women were raped, kidnapped, and killed. And so a riot had come through the village where I was born. I was born in a mud hut. My biological mother was very young when she had me. This is a photo of her holding me when I was about 6 months old. I can't imagine what she went through. Out of the violence, I was conceived. She was so young, and many of her family members were dying from disease and malnutrition, that she wanted me to have an opportunity at life. She wanted me to have a chance to live, a chance that she was not able to provide me for. So when I was 1 week old, she brought me to a nearby orphanage. When I arrived to the orphanage at 7 days old, I only weighed 3 pounds. I had 4 diseases, and I was given 1 to 2 days to live. I was so sick that they placed me in the back of the orphanage in a toy doll set where they thought, this was perfect. She can go here in peace, and we don't have to give up a crib. They placed me in the back of the orphanage outside of the bathroom, where they thought no one would see me. Coincidentally, 2 hours after I arrived to the orphanage, an American family from West Michigan happened to be at the orphanage. They had 4 kids. They weren't planning on adopting, but they wanted to be an extra set of hands for the orphanage workers. They got there, did their thing, volunteered, and the mother of the family had to go to the bathroom. She cut to the back of the orphanage, and she saw me there laying in this toy doll bassinet. And she thought to herself, oh, Amy must have a new doll. Amy is one of the orphanage workers' daughters. She went to the bathroom and came back out, and my head moved. She was very perplexed. She touched my forehead and heard a voice inside of her say, this is your daughter. She came back out and told her husband that they were being called to adopt me. He said, okay. The orphanage workers were like, oh, crazy Americans. Don't look at that baby. Look at all the other healthy babies over here. But my parents believed more in the faith of my future than the fear of my circumstance. So they brought me home to their house in a nearby village in the Congo. I didn't have any medical care as there weren't any hospitals or doctors around, but they just held me, loved me, cared for me, prayed for me. The next day I was alive. The day after that I was alive. The day after that I was alive. Spoiler alert, I lived. My parents waited for quite some time to name me. They wanted me to have a name that had meaning and significance. After I was showing signs of not just surviving, but thriving, my parents decided to name me Graci after the grace of God. When we were about 6 months old, we met back at the orphanage. And at this moment here is a photo of my biological mother giving the blessing to my mom to adopt me. And after this day, we never saw or heard from my biological mother again, and we presumed that she died. We moved forward in my adoption process. We lived in the Congo until I was nearly 4 years old, and my parents wanted me to have the opportunity of the American dream, and that also included an American education. So we moved to the US when I was nearly 4. This is a photo of my family and I. Can you guess which one is me? We grew up in a suburb outside of Grand Rapids. I had a graduating class of 500 students. Of the 500 students, I was one of the only black females. I felt like I stuck out. I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like I didn't belong. I went from living in a village, in a city, in a country, in a continent filled with people who looked like me, to a suburb and a school where no one looked like me. I hated it. I felt different, but I didn't know how to communicate it. I mean, how dare I talk about not looking like anyone else in my life when I was just grateful to have breath? so I kept it buried inside. Here's a more present-day photo of my family and I. We grew. So, as I continued to live, I kept assimilating to other people's expectations. I felt like I had these barriers and these stigmas and these stereotypes that were placed on me, and I wasn't able to be myself. And I just kept burying it and kept burying it. But I realized that there were secrets that I was keeping from the world. I already looked different than everyone else. I then felt different from everyone else, but I didn't know, and I didn't want people to know that I was different from everyone else. Since the age of 6, I was keeping it a secret that I'm gay. I thought if I communicated that I wouldn't be loved and I wouldn't be accepted. I didn't want to risk losing my friends or losing my family or losing my job, because until just a couple of years ago, it was legal to be fired from your job and evicted from your home for being LGBTQ. I just kept everything buried inside. But one day, almost 10 years ago, I sat down for a job interview. I interviewed for a global technology company. And in the interview, the director said, "Tell me of a time when you had overcome adversity." And I thought, okay, easy question, easy answer. I immediately thought about how I could talk about what it felt like to be adopted and what it felt like to move to the US and to grow up in a homogenous area. But I realized that was a cop-out, because I was already going through the motions. And when I answered him, I told him that I had been bringing fake boyfriends to Christmas parties for the previous 10 years just so I could fit in the workplace. And I told him that the truth was I never had a boyfriend. And I told him I'm overcoming adversity in this moment by telling you I'm gay. And then I remembered I was in a job interview. And I thought, okay, Gracie, you're either going to get this job because of this answer, or you're not going to get this job because of this answer. And his response to me changed my life. His response to me was that he was proud that I could live as my authentic self with him. And that if I worked there, he saw leadership opportunities in me to help other people come to work as their authentic selves. Well, the great news is I got the job. And it felt like this weight of bricks were falling off of my shoulders, that I now was able to come to work, to show up to work, instead of making up stories about people who don't exist. Do you know how stressful that is? It was amazing. When I was able to be supported in an inclusive environment, I was able to show up authentically as my full self. I had these walls that I was keeping up for so long. I was so afraid that someone would ask me how my weekend was, and that I would have to answer them. I was so afraid. I didn't want people to find out who I was. But then when I was in an inclusive environment, I no longer was afraid. I had these barriers of trust and communication come down. And when we're able to show up authentically, that means we're able to collaborate and communicate more effectively. And when we can collaborate and communicate more effectively, that also means that our teamwork increases and that our productivity increases. Teamwork increases by 50% when everyone feels included. That directly impacts our bottom line. That directly impacts our customer service. That directly impacts the work that our organizations are doing. Have you been in environments where you felt like you had to minimize yourself just to walk through the door? That you had to cover up parts of your identities just to go through? I know that's exhausting. I've lived it for so many years. But also, imagine how much more productive that we're able to be when we're able to just focus on doing our job. When we aren't able to be our authentic selves, we have barriers that automatically surround us that limit our trust, communication, collaboration, teamwork, and productivity. It wasn't people. Let me explain more specifically. It wasn't queer people in LGBTQ spaces or gay people in gay bars or coffee shops that made me feel safe and supported. It was my straight cisgender colleagues that saw me for who I am, that saw my identities as my superpower and not my shame. So when you think about yourself, and you think about yourself as an ally, know how powerful your voice and your actions are. Know how impactful your leadership is. That sometimes all it takes is just one person to say, I see you. You are safe here. You are validated. We have a place for you. You belong here. It all started with one person, that boss. Changed my life and changed the trajectory of my career. Because then I was able to have the opportunity to reach my potential instead of being stifled by my limitations. Inclusive, equitable environments allow us to be our authentic selves and have the opportunity to reach our potential. If we can't show up as who we are, then we're missing out on our purpose and who we are supposed to be. Inclusive leadership and allyship is like a toolbox. It's only useful when we open it up and take out the tools. So often we think of allyship as changing our profile photos or running in a 5K race for Wounded Warrior or autism. We think that being an ally is putting up a rainbow flag in June or wearing pink in October. That's like walking around with a locked toolbox saying that you work in construction. Being an ally and being an inclusive leader takes work. It takes us actually opening up the toolbox and getting out the tools. And getting out those tools not just for us, but getting out those tools for others around us. So things in my life were going pretty well. I was pretty comfortable. But every once in a great while, I would think about my biological mother, Mari Johnny. I thought about what it would be like to look like someone, anyone, to have the mannerisms of someone. I didn't know what that would be like. Well, I reached out to Amy in the orphanage. She was the one that had the toy doll set that I was in. I found her on Facebook. I sent her a message 7 years ago asking, do you know if Mari Johnny is still alive? I needed to have closure, something, a timeline, a date, something to know when she died. And she said, I'll ask around to find out, but let me know. I'll get back to you. And then she sent me this response from her friend. Yep, she is alive. In fact, I was in Kidodobo 2 weeks ago when she came after me asking about her daughter, but I didn't have a clue. That daughter that my biological mother was asking about was me. I couldn't believe it. She was alive after all this time. I thought she was dead. I told my mom and dad that Mari Johnny was alive and we needed to meet her. And my parents, they were very supportive, but also very surprised. The night before our trip that we were going to the Congo, my mom said to me, or asked me with tears in her eyes, she said, when you meet her, will I still be your mom? I can't begin to imagine the worry she was feeling. I can't begin to imagine the risk my mom was taking. But she knew it was worth it. And she wanted to support her daughter on this journey. Flying to the Congo felt like I was sitting on top of the world's largest roller coaster. Its thrill excited me. Its magnitude intimidated me. I was nauseous. My apprehension was building, but I had to meet her. We got to the Congo, and we had to rely on word of mouth. My biological mother was still living in a mud hut. She didn't know I knew she was alive. She didn't have access to a phone or internet, so we just showed up. There are 800,000 people in my hometown. In 4 days, word of mouth spread so quickly that I was there that she found out. And the whole village wanted to watch our reunion as if it were a reality show. Everyone was gathered together. I was so scared, so nervous. I had no idea how she felt about meeting me. I also found out that I had 2 biological brothers who were not adopted. So that made me even more nervous, more terrified, more scared. How would she feel? How would it be? I'm sure you're wondering, how was it to meet your biological mother? Meeting my biological mother was perfect. It was like a script from a movie. When I saw her, I knew her. My dad was recording the film, and the first thing she said to me was, "My child, my child, my child." I got to see myself reflected in her, and I found out where my smile comes from. My mom and my dad were so moved by the experience as well. My parents were so moved by our trip to the Congo that they physically moved to the Congo the next year, where now my mom and dad run a faith-based nonprofit, and they help support my biological mother and other women in my hometown who've been survivors of rape, sex trafficking, and abuse. Things were going pretty well. Now, my biological mother is a major part of my life. In this first photo, you see my dad holding his phone as we are FaceTiming for the first time. And in that conversation, I am sure that was the first time my biological mother has ever seen a smartphone. I can't imagine what it was like for her to see her daughter in real time on the other side of the world, but her smile says it all. And the photo in the middle, of course, we got to get a selfie together. And the photo at the end are my biological brothers with my parents. Life isn't just about accomplishing professional goals. It's also about accomplishing personal goals. One of the goals that I had when I met my biological mother was to buy her a house. A house means warmth, safety, sanitation, and the ability to make and store food. My biological mother has never lived in a house. She has never had her own bed. She has slept on the dirt, clay ground for the last 30 years. My biological mother and my brother has never had his own bed. She's never had a kitchen. So a few years ago, with the help of my mom and dad, I got her a house. In the first photo, she's sitting proudly in front of her house. The second photo is my brother sitting on his very own bed. And in the last photo, my mom describes it as her kitchen is in the back of the house. She's cooking beans to serve with rice. You bought her everything for life, and she repeatedly rejoices. I'm so proud to now financially support my biological mother and my brothers for the rest of their lives. I can't imagine what they have gone through. I can't imagine what they've lived through. But I'm just grateful to have them. I was comfortable. I was comfortable in my life, and I was comfortable in my career. But growth doesn't come from comfort. Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg says, "Careers are a jungle gym, not a ladder. If I had planned my career, I would have missed my career." The same goes for me. I was ready to make a greater impact. I was ready to do more, even if it meant that it was uncomfortable. I had this urge to do more. So I left the tech company and I took a leap. I took a leap into an industry that really needed diversity and inclusion work. It was a risk. I received a lot of praise, and I also received a lot of criticism. People were much more interested in throwing rocks from the sidelines than they were actually doing the work. I'd let other people's negative opinions and feedback get to me. We were doing a lot behind the scenes, but on the surface, I was barely hanging on. I started getting panic attacks. I got threatened. I got assaulted multiple times. I got robbed just for having the career that I had. I felt like I was in a cave. I felt like I was all alone. I felt like I was in the eye of the storm. I started having panic attacks. I didn't know how to communicate with anyone. But I learned that I couldn't let people's negative criticisms get me. I couldn't take it to heart. So I did some deep reflection with Brene Brown's Daring Greatly and remembered my purpose. Daring Greatly is based on Teddy Roosevelt's speech, "The Man in the Arena." It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or how the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by blood and sweat and tears, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who does actually do the deeds, the great enthusiasms, who knows the great devotions, who at best knows the achievement. Who at best spends himself in a worthy cause and knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. I realize that you can't take criticism and feedback from people who aren't being brave with their lives. Thank you, Brene Brown. That I no longer cared about what the critics were saying. I no longer cared about the rocks that people were trying to throw at me. What I cared about was living in my purpose, and what I cared about is being authentic to myself and being true to my purpose and why I am here. So I chose to use my voice, to stand up publicly for what I believe in, to stand up for what's right. I resigned from that job. I received a lot of feedback. I received a lot of praise, and I received a lot of criticism. But this time, I didn't care, because it's not the critic who counts. I had work to do. I leaned on my faith for direction, my parents for wisdom, and my close friends for support. I lived so long and for so many lives, what feels like lifetimes, so many years, wishing I was somebody else, wishing I had different identities. I realized that I couldn't pick and choose the identities that I wanted to be, but also that I couldn't accept myself until I fully accepted all aspects of myself. In the words of Brene Brown, true belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. True belonging requires you to be who you are. For so long, I looked for acceptance and belonging in others, instead of focusing on my purpose and realizing that the power to rise was already within me. So I took another risk. 3 years ago, I started my own business. And I recently finished writing a book called Rising, which comes out in April. And in this journey, so often in our lives, we let our fear stunt us. We let our fear hold us back. We listen to those limitations and those doubts in our heads instead of fighting them. But it's important that we tap into our potential, that we tap into our greatness, because that's what's going to enrich our lives. We are often uncomfortable with the unfamiliar. We're often uncomfortable to what's new. But we need to get in the habit of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because growth comes from that. Growth comes from that for ourselves, and also growth for others. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. For so many years, I was living for the expectations of others. But being supported in inclusive environments and finding my voice, leaning on my faith, and meant I was able to be my authentic self. When we're only able to be our best selves when we're able to be our authentic selves. All it takes is one person to make a difference, one person to make an impact, one person to speak up, one person to act. Your voice is powerful. No matter what challenges or obstacles come in your way, you have the ability to rise. You have the power within you. But sometimes it takes us being uncomfortable. It takes us speaking up. It takes us acting out. It takes action. We're not going to change the world just sitting here silently, quietly to ourselves. But we will change the world when we speak up, when we start making a difference. Life is a journey. You don't have to be born in a mud hut to have a story. We all have a story, and we all have a purpose. We all go through adversities which try to hold us down and keep us back. By the grace of God, I was found. But God knew that my story wasn't over. My story isn't just for me. My story is for all of us to know that you are not alone. I know that life is hard. The journey isn't easy. There will continue to be sideways turns and risks and obstacles and tormenting situations. Through our challenges, our paths might look much different than we had originally planned. But our purpose is worth living, even through those adversities. When we are our authentic selves, living and leading our purpose, our power is limitless. Use your voice. Speak your truth. Embrace your identities. Value others. And bring your whole self into this world so that you can live and lead more authentically. Thank you.
Graci, thank you. I think we've got a few minutes if anybody has questions for Graci.
You can ask anything.
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
What tips would you have for a leader who is trying to create a culture of authenticity in their workplace? Maybe three top tips.
Yeah, okay, great. Lead by example. It starts from the top. Number 2, embrace people for who they are. So often we try to, like when we're interviewing, we say, oh, are they going to be a culture fit? Yeah, they might be able to fit here. Instead of us realizing and retraining our brains to say, what do they have that we can learn from, instead of us trying to change them. The third tip, take the time to get to know people. I know it's hard, especially in this virtual world where we are so quick. We are, all right, the Zoom call is ending in 1 minute, bye. But take time to have team building opportunities so that our teams can actually get to know what drives one another. Why do your employees come to work? What motivates them? When we know what their passions are and what drives them, we're better able to lead more effectively and make sure that they have a sense of belonging. Great question.
Good. Other questions?
Don't be shy. You can ask anything.
Any other questions? Linda.
Does your biological mother speak English, or how do you communicate, or what is the...
Great question. She does not speak English. We communicate with 2 sets of translators. English to Swahili, Swahili to Mashi. Yes, it's a situation. Kyle.
Because I know you a little bit, can you tell us how your departure from the brewery job got you to where you are now?
Good question. Google it. Google Graci Harkema, and then you'll see the articles of what happened. And it was terrifying. I left a really prominent position with a 6-figure salary. I'm a single black female. I left it all. I risked it all. I didn't know I was going to be standing on this stage today. I had no idea how I was going to make it. But luckily, my parents taught me how to save, so that was great. It was a risk. I had this intuition. I went on vacation, and on the flight back, I kept thinking, I was making notes of what companies in West Michigan would I like to work for? And I'm like having my list, like Myers, Spectrum Health, Spectrum Zealand, And when I looked at the list, there were all these great companies, and I thought, why do I have to say that I'm going to work for one of these companies? Why don't I create that company? But you can read all about that in my book. It's available for pre-order right now, anywhere you buy books. Good question, Kyle.
Any other questions?
How does your faith play a role in all decisions?
Good question. My faith is really the pillar of my life. I know sometimes it's not a popular reason, but it's true. I find that my faith is my center, and when I have these moments of, not knowing what my career is going to be or not knowing how to have the courage, my faith gives me the empowerment that I needed, the push to know, like, hey, you are doing the right thing. And, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the right thing to do is always the right thing to do, even when it's scary. So my faith helps me just be centered in my decision making, even when I make these vast decisions like leaving my last job or starting a business. I never had inkling to be an entrepreneur, ever. Never even thought it was possible. But here we are. Next month, I'm celebrating 3 years of Graci LLC. Thank you. Thank you. And I've also gone international. I'm in 5 countries and 10 states.
Amazing. Tom?
So you mentioned in an interview that you had a coming out, sort of.
Yeah.
Was your family aware at the time of that interview?
They had no idea, Tom.
So how did that process go for you?
It was really hard. You can read about that in chapter 5 of my book. It was challenging. People think of coming out as this one time, like, okay, you did it, check the box, now live your life. And I'm coming out over and over and over and over. And sometimes it is still hard. But what keeps me grounded is knowing, hey, this is me. People are gonna accept me for who I am, or they're not. And if they don't, I'm gonna keep it moving. With or without them. Yeah.
Why are you still here in West Michigan?
Oh, I get asked that question all the time. Like, West Michigan is bad. Like, why do you live here?
What is the good thing?
My family is here. I love my family. They're really great. But New York City is in my 5-year goal.
Hey, Graci, we've seen inclusion and equity practices and approaches starting to become ingrained in more of our institutions and organizations in West Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also seen some corresponding pushback from the community at times and others.
Yeah.
What would you say to both sides that are trying to shine a light on what it could be like to be more inclusive,
Yeah.
and those that really feel threatened by it?
Always stay grounded in your mission. If your mission is to create a great place of employment where your employees have the opportunity to reach their potential and you're providing great customer service, they're not going to be able to do that if they can't be themselves. If your mission is to create a city where people are welcome, where they can have a thriving family and feel safe and supported, they're not going to be able to do that if they can't be their authentic self. So if you stay grounded in your mission, all sides should support that. Great question.
Any other questions? Good. Graci, thank you so much for being here today and for challenging each of us to be the type of leader that lets our team show up fully at our places of employment. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Jody, and thanks to you all. Thank you so much.